Hello, and welcome. Find a comfortable position, nestled in your bed. Allow your body to feel heavy, supported, and safe. Let the gentle rumble of a distant storm wash over you, a soothing rhythm to guide your breath. Breathe in slowly and out. Let go of the day. We're about to drift back in time, carried on the sounds of this summer thunderstorm. Have you ever wondered what happens when a city of nearly 8 million people is suddenly plunged into darkness? Let the sound of a summer thunderstorm guide you back to a hot July night in 1977. As we drift through the darkened streets of New York City and explore the moments of chaos and surprising pockets of community, during the 25 hours the lights went out. There's nothing for you to do but relax and listen. Let your mind drift as we travel to a city on the edge, a city holding its breath at the end of a long, hot summer day. Our story begins not with a flash of lightning, but with the slow burn of a city in distress. The New York City of 1977 was a place of deep contrasts, a metropolis of glittering ambition and profound decay, all simmering together under an oppressive summer sun. To understand what happened when the lights went out, we first have to feel the city as it was then. Tense, weary, and waiting for something to break. Imagine the air itself. It's July, and a brutal, suffocating heat wave has clamped down on the East Coast. The temperature has been climbing for days, pushing towards 100 degrees, and the humidity hangs like a wet blanket over everything. The asphalt on the sidewalks feels soft, almost sticky, underfoot. The air is thick, carrying the smells of hot garbage, exhaust fumes, and the metallic scent of the subway. In apartments across the 5 boroughs, window fans do little more than churn the hot air, their whirring drone a constant, tired soundtrack to the city's life. People with air conditioning run their units relentlessly, a collective hum of machinery putting an immense strain on the city's power grid. The city itself feels tired, worn thin by forces far beyond the weather. New York in the late 1970s was a city on the verge of bankruptcy. The vibrant pulse that had defined it for decades had weakened to a thready, uncertain rhythm. A deep financial crisis had taken hold, forcing the city to its knees. Factories that had once been the backbone of entire neighborhoods had closed, their gates chained, their windows dark. In just 6 years, the city had hemorrhaged hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs, leaving a void filled with uncertainty and desperation. The wealthy, those who could, had fled to the suburbs, taking their precious tax dollars with them. This exodus left the city poorer, struggling to pay for basic services. The government was forced to make painful cuts, a strategy some coldly called planned shrinkage, where services were pulled from the poorest neighborhoods. Sanitation trucks sat idle, and garbage piled up on street corners, a monument to the city's decline. Fire stations were closed, their doors boarded up, leaving neighborhoods feeling vulnerable. The unemployment rate was painfully high, approaching 10%, leaving hundreds of thousands with a sense of hopelessness. For many, the grand promise of New York felt like a distant memory, replaced by a daily struggle for survival. This economic despair bred a palpable social tension. Crime rates had soared. The streets felt less safe, the nights more menacing, and woven into this fabric of anxiety was a specific, terrifying thread: the son of Sam. For over a year, a serial killer had been stalking the city, his attacks seemingly random, his motives unknown. He used a powerful .44 caliber revolver, targeting young people, often couples in parked cars. He sent taunting, chilling letters to the press, signing them Son of Sam, a name that became a whisper of fear on everyone's lips. The media fanned the flames of this panic. Women across the city, particularly those with the long, dark hair the killer seemed to prefer, changed their hairstyles, hoping to make themselves less of a target. Going out at night now felt like a dangerous gamble. The fear was an invisible character in every interaction, an undercurrent of dread flowing through the already tense city. It was the summer of fear, a time when the city felt besieged from within and without. The heat, the financial crisis, the crime, the specter of a killer on the loose, it all blended into a volatile atmosphere. The city was a powder keg, and as the sun began to set on Wednesday, July 13, 1977, a storm was gathering to the north, a storm that would provide the spark. As twilight settled over the city, the sky to the north, over Westchester County, was bruised and purple. A severe thunderstorm was rolling in, its approach marked by flickers of distant lightning. For millions of New Yorkers trying to find relief from the heat, the storm might have seemed like a promise of a cool breeze. But for the city's electrical grid, already groaning under the load of millions of air conditioners, it was a threat. The grid was a complex web, the circulatory system carrying the lifeblood of the city, and it was about to suffer a series of devastating blows. Our story of the darkness begins at precisely 8:37 p.m. At that moment, a bolt of lightning, a jagged spear of pure energy, tore through the humid air and struck a critical substation in Buchanan, New York, on the banks of the Hudson River. This wasn't just any substation, it was a vital artery, converting the immense power from the Indian Point nuclear plant for the city's use. The strike was a direct hit, and it instantly tripped two major circuit breakers like a switch being suddenly flipped off. In a healthy system, this might have been a minor hiccup, but on this night, a tiny component, a single loose locking nut, prevented one of the breakers from reclosing. The artery remained blocked, the first domino in a catastrophic chain reaction. The system, already strained, scrambled to compensate. Power was rerouted, putting even more stress on the remaining connections. Then, just minutes later, the storm struck again. A second bolt of lightning took out two more crucial transmission lines that were the primary conduits from Indian Point. The city's main power source from the north was now severely choked off. The system operators at the Consolidated Edison Control Center watched in growing alarm as their monitors lit up with warnings. Following procedure, at 8:45 p.m., they tried to bring another power source online, a fast start generator for emergencies. But in a city crippled by budget cuts, the station was unmanned. The attempt to start it remotely failed. The city's failsafe had failed. The dominoes were falling faster. At 8:55 p.m., the storm delivered another blow. A third lightning strike hit a substation in Yonkers, knocking out two more critical lines. Each time a line went down, the burden on the remaining lines increased exponentially. They began to overheat, their metal cores groaning under a load they were never meant to carry. In the control room, operators made a desperate decision. They began to shed load, deliberately reducing voltage across the system in a brownout to prevent a full blackout. They reduced voltage by 5% and then by 8%. But it was too little, too late. There had been a communication breakdown. The regional power pool had told them to cut power to entire sections. A drastic but necessary move. Instead, Con Edison performed the slower, less effective voltage reduction. The system was now in its death throes. At 9:19 p.m., a major interconnection to upstate New York tripped. The intense heat from the overloaded cables had caused them to sag and short-circuit. Now, the city was becoming an electrical island. The remaining connections to Long Island and New Jersey were overloaded beyond their limits, a torrent of power trying to force its way through a garden hose. The final blow came from within the city itself. In Queens, the city's largest and most powerful generator, Ravenswood Unit Number 3, known as Big Alice, had been working overtime to keep the city alive. But the wild fluctuations from the collapsing grid sent confusing signals to its protective systems. Thinking it was saving itself from an internal failure, Big Alice did what it was designed to do. It shut down. At 9:29 p.m., the giant generator went silent. The heart had stopped beating. For a few more minutes, the city clung to life. But the collapse was now inevitable. By 9:37 p.m., almost exactly 1 hour after the first bolt of lightning, the last connections failed. The entire Con Edison power system was gone. Silence and darkness. For a single, surreal moment, New York City held its breath. In millions of apartments, the hum of refrigerators and the drone of air conditioners stopped. TVs and radios went silent mid-sentence. At Shea Stadium, where the Mets were playing the Chicago Cubs, the brilliant floodlights blinked out, plunging 16,000 fans into bewildering darkness. Deep beneath the city, hundreds of subway trains, carrying thousands of commuters, screeched to a halt in the pitch-black tunnels. The first emotion wasn't fear, but profound, shared confusion. People rushed to their windows, expecting to see a block-wide outage, but instead saw a sea of blackness stretching to the horizon. No streetlights, no traffic signals, no glowing office towers. The iconic skyline was simply gone. The only lights were the headlights of cars moving tentatively through dark intersections and the pinpricks of flashlights starting to appear in windows. The city's constant roar was replaced by an unfamiliar quiet. And then, a new sound began to emerge. It was the sound of people. Voices calling from windows, the shuffle of feet as residents ventured onto their stoops and sidewalks, the nervous laughter of disbelief. What just happened? Is it just us? For those who remembered the city's last major blackout in 1965, there was maybe a moment of nostalgia. The '65 blackout had been almost festive, a moment of communal spirit. For a short while, it seemed history might repeat itself. In neighborhoods like Greenwich Village, a spirit of camaraderie did bubble up. People gathered on the streets with acoustic guitars and battery-powered radios, creating impromptu block parties under the stars. For the first time in generations, the Milky Way was faintly visible above the canyons of Manhattan. But this was not 1965. The city was different. The mood was different. The simmering anger and desperation that had been building for years couldn't be contained. The thin veneer of social order, already stretched to its limit, began to tear. And it tore first in the neighborhoods hit hardest by the city's economic decline. The sound of shattering glass was the first signal. It began in places like Bushwick, Crown Heights, and Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, and across Harlem and the South Bronx. At first, it might have been a few individuals, but in the total darkness, the impulse spread like a contagion. Storefronts, bodegas, clothing stores, electronics shops became targets. People smashed windows and used cars to pull the security grates from buildings. This was not the polite camaraderie of 1965. This was a raw, explosive outpouring of frustration. A populace that felt unheard and unseen was now lashing out in the dark. The looting was brazen. In the Bronx, thieves drove 50 brand-new Pontiacs out of a dealership showroom. In Brooklyn, people backed cars up to stores and loaded them with stolen goods. 35 blocks of Broadway were devastated. It felt, to many who witnessed it, like the city was consuming itself. The darkness hadn't brought people together. It had revealed just how far apart they'd been all along. The night was just beginning. As the dark hours wore on, New York City split into two starkly different realities. Your experience of the blackout depended entirely on where you were when the lights went out. One city was a landscape of chaos, while the other was a place of unexpected connection. In the areas engulfed by unrest, the night descended into anarchy. The city's emergency services were completely overwhelmed. The fire department was stretched to an impossible breaking point as arson became rampant. Over 1,000 fires were reported during the blackout. Many were set intentionally, some to distract police from looting, others as acts of pure vandalism. In Bushwick, some fires were still burning the next morning. Firefighters, their departments thinned by budget cuts, raced from blaze to blaze, sometimes pelted with rocks and bottles by hostile crowds. The police were in a similar state of siege. They were vastly outnumbered. Reports describe officers simply standing by, unable to stop the sheer volume of looting. The night saw what was then the largest mass arrest in the city's history, with more than 3,700 people taken into custody. The city's jails were instantly overwhelmed. For the small business owners who had poured their lives into their shops, it was a night of utter ruin. One man recounted standing with 30 police officers, all of them helpless, as his furniture store was completely emptied. In one night, entire commercial districts were hollowed out, with damages estimated at over $300 million. Many of these businesses would never reopen. Yet, in another version of the city, the darkness brought a strange, gentle magic. On quiet residential streets in Queens, families sat on their front porches, talking to neighbors they'd only ever nodded to before. Without the distraction of television, people talked. They told stories. They listened to battery-powered radios for news. In Manhattan, neighborhoods like Greenwich Village, the atmosphere was almost a carnival. People poured out of their hot apartments and into the streets, sharing candles, beer, and food before it could spoil. Strangers became friends for a night. An impromptu concert might start on a corner, powered by an acoustic guitar. In the immense darkness of Central Park, people lay on the grass and gazed up at a sky filled with stars, a celestial show long since washed out by the city's perpetual glow. And in the privacy of darkened apartments, it said another kind of connection was happening. The blackout forced a city that never stops to finally be still. This led to a popular urban legend, a story that became part of the blackout's folklore, that about 9 months later, hospitals saw a noticeable spike in births. While official records don't quite prove a citywide baby boom, the story itself speaks to the unexpected intimacy found in the stillness of that long, dark night. This tale of two cities unfolded through the night. While some New Yorkers were picking through the wreckage of their lives, others were waking up with a story they would tell for years to come. The sun rose on Thursday, July 14th, to a city still mostly without power. The daylight didn't bring relief, but a harsh light on the night's damage. The heat and humidity returned, making the powerless city even more uncomfortable. For those in the looted neighborhoods, the scene was one of devastation. Streets were carpeted with broken glass. The blackened shells of burned-out buildings stood against the morning sky. Storefronts were gaping wounds. The chaotic energy of the night had vanished, leaving behind a grim, exhausted silence. Meanwhile, an army of Con Edison engineers and technicians had been working tirelessly through the night. Restoring a collapsed power grid isn't like flipping a switch. It's a delicate process. Power has to be brought back sequentially, network by network, to avoid another catastrophic overload. The first flickers of light returned before dawn in parts of Queens. Throughout the day on Thursday, power was slowly and carefully restored, block by block. For those who had been in darkness for nearly a day, the moment the lights came back on was one of profound relief. The hum of a refrigerator, the glow of a single light bulb. These simple things felt like miracles. By the afternoon, about half the city had power again. But it wasn't until 10:39 p.m. on Thursday night, a full 25 hours after the city went dark, that the last neighborhood was reconnected. The great New York City blackout of 1977 was finally over, but the city that emerged was not the same. The blackout acted like a brutal X-ray, revealing deep fractures in the city's social and economic bones. It laid bare the consequences of years of economic decline and simmering desperation. A fierce debate erupted. Mayor Abraham Beame condemned the chaos and called Con Edison grossly negligent. But many saw the roots of the disorder in the city's dire financial state. In the long run, the blackout forced significant changes. The electrical grid was overhauled with better safeguards, but the deeper scars were social. For many, the blackout solidified an image of New York as a dangerous, ungovernable place, fueling a tough-on-crime attitude that would shape city politics for decades. Yet, it also became a turning point, a moment that forced the city to confront its deepest problems. From the ashes of 1977, a long, difficult period of rebuilding would begin, a struggle to reclaim the city's spirit. The story of the 1977 blackout is more than a story about a power failure. It's the story of a city at its breaking point. It's a story of lightning from a summer storm, and of a different kind of lightning, the sudden, explosive release of years of pent-up anger. It reminds us how fragile our modern world truly is, and how quickly the veneer of order can disappear. But it is also a story that holds surprising moments of light within its darkness. The impromptu parties, the shared candles, the neighbors who spoke for the first time, and the quiet resilience of a city that, despite its wounds, would eventually find its way back. Now, let the memory of the story fade, leaving only the sound of the rain. Allow this gentle rhythm to carry you deeper into rest, into peaceful, restorative sleep. If you've enjoyed this sleepy journey into the past, please consider subscribing to the channel for more historical sleep stories. We'd also love to hear your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. We hope you have a deeply restful night.